I'm going to say something dangerous, and that is that you need to take possession of your art. Now, the reason that this is a dangerous piece of information is the fact that first you have to have the capacity, and you may be completely unaware of your capacity to do this. So there's this little thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and if you were to graph it out, you have confidence here, and you have experience here. And what that ends up looking like on a graph is very early on, your confidence goes way up here, and then from there, it kind of dips, and as you middle out, you kind of balance out, and then it comes up again, and it usually never gets way back up to that ridiculous spot. Now, clearly, that's not how everybody works, but the fact is that that is a reasonable enough algorithm to guide us on things. If you are very early in your journey, if you have not been at it for very long, then no matter how confident you feel, you probably need to back off for a little while. It's not time to take possession of your art yet. However, if you're in the middle of the journey, you may have convinced yourself that it is not time to take possession of your art yet either. And that's perfectly okay. But at some point, right, once you kind of pass this and pass this, let's say we get here, definitely not time. And we get here, you won't allow yourself to, right? But somewhere in this realm, right, right up in here, that is definitely a place where you need to be starting to look at taking possession of your art. You see, one of the things that we kind of forget in the modern martial arts world, and I see this on the modern sports side of things as well as on the traditional side of things, is that our forebears always took the ball and ran with it. And because these people were constantly fighting and early styles of competition were much less forgiving, you always had the litmus test for whether your stuff worked or it didn't. And so we always had a more honest measure. And I say always, but that's never true. Because we do have, evidence of people griping about, flowery village styles in China, and, people calling each other out on their stuff earlier on. So this has always been kind of a thing. But, why do we have so many different lineages or so many different subtypes of, categorically similar styles, right? Why are there, even in boxing, how many different styles of boxing are there, right? Boxing is just this one sport, right? But, the Cubans box differently than the Mexicans, and they do it differently than Americans. But then depending on where you're in America, that's different. And then depending on, maybe you go to a Russian and they're different. And styles of boxing are different. Why? Because each one of those guys, each one of those coaches at the very least has taken possession of the art. And very high level guys fight differently from one another because they've gone through the journey to the point where they have adopted their own style, or rather they have put their own thumbprint on the art themselves. And they didn't do this out of some egotistic way of saying, this is mine. They're not going around mushroom stamping everything. What they're really doing is they're just taking possession of it and saying, this is my thing now. I need to craft this so I can best use it. Much better parallel, one that you can maybe see, is cooking. And that's the idea of, a beginner often has to cook out of a recipe book. They open up a recipe book and they go, oh, things go in these proportions and it makes this much, and oh, these flavors combine together, but if I use this other thing, this flavor doesn't go. And you know what, over time, what do? They experiment and they grow. Well, if that's the journey they're on, they experiment and they grow and they try things, and they try things they didn't see in the books. They try things their teachers didn't tell them. And the next thing you know, you get really, really, really high level guys, And the guys that you see on these cooking competitions and whatnot that are just absolutely fantastic. And why are they up there? Because they dared to go beyond the techniques that were given to them in school, beyond the techniques that were written down in the books. They dared to take possession and move it into the next level. We see the same thing in music. You run your scales, you learn your instrument, you learn all of those things, how the notes go together, how they don't, and the next thing you know, you have jazz. And all bets are off, and you can just do whatever you want because nothing is wrong, because nobody can tell you it's wrong because it's art. Well, maybe martial arts isn't so much like that, because obviously we do have the litmus test of, does it work in a fight? But the other thing that we can say is all fights are different. No two opponents are the same. No two environments are the same. No 2 days are the same. And there are so many factors that go into the chaos of this that it makes it almost impossible for you to be able to just copy what somebody else did and make it work 100% of the time. It's not possible. One last analogy that we can look at this is tracing. I like to draw. I do a lot of the graphic design, I do all of the graphic design for our shirts, but I do a lot of graphic design, period, just for fun, because I like that. I just grew up with a pencil in my hand. And I'm not even a fantastic artist. I'm mediocre. But the fact is that when you're learning how to draw, you often start tracing. You start coloring. You start with somebody else's picture and you do something with that other person's picture, and then you learn how to copy. You learn how to visually take somebody else's picture and reproduce it without tracing the lines, but reproducing from an image. And eventually, now even absolutely astounding professional artists still use reference images, but eventually you have to be able to draw the picture yourself, potentially without a reference image, and without actually copying somebody else's image. Even if you're using a reference, it may be a reference for a part or whatever, but eventually you have to stop tracing. And so the fact is that as you go, if every single training session, all you're doing is copying what somebody else told you, if you're doing things the same way that the people before you did them, you are not progressing, you are not growing, you have not taken possession of the art, you are doing somebody else's art. And all you are ever going to be is a facsimile. And that's okay. I'm not saying there's something wrong with that. What I'm saying is that it puts a cap on your progress, because copying somebody else, you will never go farther than that person did. And the fact is that there's no guarantee that you're going to go farther than somebody else anyway. I can't make any of those kind of guarantees. But I can guarantee you that you will not go farther than that other person if all you ever did was what they did. It's just not possible. You cannot do the same thing and expect different results. That's just how reality works. So on the one side, we do have to be absolutely cognizant of the Dunning-Kruger effect and the fact that we have to get past those noob gains and start having some failures and some successes and moderate that a bit before we can get on that journey. But you get past that first spike and you get past that big deep valley. Once you get past those two things, maybe it's time to start looking at, again, not mushroom stamping the art, not trying to force it to be your style, but just taking possession of it and recognizing where things make better sense to you than they did before, and where you can explain things in a way, or you can put things into your own words and make them work for you better and make it so that you can teach it better. So at some point you absolutely should be taking possession of your art for yourself, because it is your journey. It is not your responsibility to copy your teacher. And no good teacher wants their student to copy them anyway. That's just the egomaniacs that have, frailty problems. Good teachers want their students to surpass them, and the only way you can do that is if you actually take the ball and run with it. So with that, I'm going to get out of here, and I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. like and subscribe. In the links down below, you can find our social media, and I encourage you to follow us there. Take a look at our blog, where we have articles that go into depth that we just can't do in our video productions. And on top of that, go to our Amazon store, pick out a shirt that you like, and every little bit helps. If you're ever in the Phoenix area, look us up. Come in for a class, come in for open mat, whatever. Love to see you down here. You can find all our contact info on the website. Talk to you guys in the next one. Good journey.